Hi, I am Gregor Mendel, also known as the father of modern genetics, and you have already known about me. I will first talk about my life to then lean to the experiments that have discovered genetics. I was born in the middle of a very poor family in the Republic Czech on the 19th century. As my father do not have enough money to give me a proper education, they lent me to a monastery where I become a father. In my peaceful days, I mostly observed plants and their reproduction. And I noticed something. Some plants didn't even change a bit, while others changed by much. What then led to this? And I started investigating. For this experiment, I used peas fruit, or peas plants, due to their accessibility, their variability, and also their price, as I was fairly poor in that time. I learned over 46,000 experiments in order to prove my hypothesis that some characteristics, even in plants or in animals, are dominant. They override over other characteristics, so one show up and the other no, or they combine in order to make some. I start only by changing the height of plants, short with tall, tall with tall, short with short, and it gave me a very interesting moment. When I crossed a short with a tall, the only offspring that they gave me, they were tall. But when I do it again, the result was different. There was some shorts where there were some talls. Then it gave me what it was, segregation. When the characteristics move from one parent to another, lending their characteristics to the offsprings. Then that characteristics that are already combined segregate even more in order to make even more combinations, giving an infinite amount of characteristics within an individual. I didn't know about yet at this time, but my discoveries will be great someday, and I hope they have been.
Gregor Mendel conducted hybridization experiments on around 29 pea plants. Peas were an ideal choice for Mendel to use because they had easily observable traits. There were 7 of which he could manipulate. Mendel's reputation had also grown considerably, and most introductory genetics textbooks refer to him as the father of genetics. But some science historians have argued that he really does not deserve this title because his article emphasizes the behavior of plants hybrids and he never fully described two allele genetic systems that we're familiar with today. However, his stated purpose was to deduce the law according to which the polymorphic traits appear in the successive generations. Certainly, even if Mendel did not use the term inheritance, there can be a little doubt that he was interested in how traits were passed on from one generation to the next generation. A more seriously charge was raised by Fischer, who, after a carefully statistical evaluation of Mendel's data, he concluded that the data of most, if not all, of the experiments of Mendel have been falsified so as to agree closely with Mendel's expectations.
Gregor Mendel discovered the fundamental laws of inheritance. He deduced that genes come in pairs and are inherited as distinct units, one from each parent. So, by knowing this, he established 3 laws. The first one is the law of segregation, the second one is the law of independent assortment, and the third one is the law of dominance. The first one talks about that each inherited trait is defined by a gene pair. Parental genes are randomly separated to the sex cells, so that sex cells contain only one gene of the pair. Offspring therefore inherit one genetic allele from each parent when sex cells unite in fertilization. The second one talks about the independent assortment, which means that genes for different traits are sorted separately from one another so that the inheritance of one trait is not dependent from the inheritance of another one. Finally, the law of dominance talks about basically talks about an organism with alternate forms of gene that will express the form that is dominant. How we know? Well, it is already established in the genes which are the characteristics that are dominant. So those were the three laws of Gregor Mendel, and thank you.
Gregor Mendel was a scientist that made a lot of research of heredity and genetics. He starts his studies at the community in Brno and then was sent to fill a temporary teaching position in Sein. However, he failed a teaching certification exam the following year, and in 1851 he was sent to the University of Vienna at the monastery expense to continue his studies in sciences. While there, Mendel studied mathematics and physics. Then he studied botany under Franz Unger. And then he started to use the microscope in his studies and become a proponent of a pre-Darwin version of evolutionary theory. In 1853, he completed his studies at the University of Vienna and he returned to the monastery to give a teaching position at a secondary school.